All right, so this session, we're going to be talking about some date functions. And I want you to become real familiar with them. And there's two, especially, I'm going to start off with one that I think is super important that everyone understands. And then we'll talk about several others to make sure you're familiar with those. And then we'll get into time hierarchies and how we can work with them. Okay? The one that I really want to make sure you take away from today is working with the toDate function. So converting a string date into an actual date, okay? And one of the most common scenarios that we use this for is when we have prompts that have dates. So if I refresh this report right now, you'll see that I have a start date and an end date on my order date function. Okay, so I'm going from January 1st to May 6th of 2018. And I brought them in. And you will recall that we have in our report elements and our predefined cells or predefined formulas, we can capture that. So I can capture this start prompt, and I'm just going to drop it there and expand that out so that you can see that it actually includes the timestamp with it as well. So this is my start date that I specified when I ran this report, and this is the end date. However, anytime this is not, it didn't bring it in as just a date. It brought it in and it's using a function to select or return to the user what information they selected. And so the formula is up here in the formula bar, this user response. And the user response function, if I were to save this as a variable, and I'll just call this the start date. And I'll click that and say, okay. Notice that the data type says text. And that's because the user response is a function, and no matter what is returned in here, even if it was a number, it would still, the data type would be text. It always returns a text string from our user response. So what I want to be able to do is be able to manipulate it or format it in a certain way because I want to be able to use it in my title. So in this case, I want to display Ohio customer orders between January 1st to May 6th, okay? But I don't want these timestamps on there. I could just copy that part of the formula and append it to this. But notice how it has that timestamp on the end. And I want to get rid of that. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about. And in order to do that formatting, we can't jump right into format date because the format date function takes a date and formats it as a string. And in our case, this is already a string. It's already text. So we have to first convert it into a date, and then we can convert it into whatever format we want from there. So this is the hack that I want to show you with the toDate function. The thing to remember with the toDate function is that when you specify the format at the end, so the function says toDate, and then you specify what object you want to turn into a date, and then I put a semicolon, and then we specify a format. So this format, what it's doing is telling BusinessObjects which one of these is the month and which is the day and which is the year, etc. Okay? So what the trick is that you have to match what the source was in the first place. And then later on, we can change that formatting with other functions. But what we want to do is, in this case, I'll say month, day, YYY, and then hour, minute, second, and then an A because it's showing the AM there. And I'll close my quote and close my parentheses. And when I hit enter, you see how it turned it into a date. And if I were to save this now as a variable, it would recognize it as a date. So here is the important thing I want you to remember is that you have to match the original format, not what you want it to end up looking like, okay? Very often I see users trying to get it to look like, let's say they want it to be just the 4 year like that. And if I hit enter there, I get this pound error because I'm not matching the original source. Notice even that if I leave off this A there, I also get the pound error. Okay, so I have to match exactly what that original source, the original format was like, and then I can reformat it. For example, now I'll wrap this whole thing in a format date function. And then at the end of this, I'll add my semicolon. And this time I want, whoops, semicolon. And double quote. And this time I'm going to say MM, or maybe even DD/MM YYYY. Okay, so now I have it like that. Now I could save this as a variable, and this will be my start date. And I can append that variable to my report title now. So instead of that, I'll append my start date there. And notice that it has my format that I want there. And then the fast thing to do would be just to duplicate that for my end date, because the only difference between this formula and the other formula would be, instead of enter start date, this one says end date. So I'm going to duplicate that variable. And then we'll modify the name to end date. And I'll change the prompt text. Instead of start, change that to end. All right. And then I could append that on here as well. I'll say plus, and then I'm going to add a space, maybe even a dash, and plus the end date. Let me grab that and hit enter. Oops, I appended it to the wrong thing. Let me copy that. Thought I was on my report title. There we go. Oh, I'm missing the plus sign there. Okay, there we go. And notice, since I used day, month, it's showing it like that. Which leads me to the other thing that I want to mention about the formatting of dates. Our last refresh date is also a very common variable that we use. It drops it on here. Notice it doesn't have a timestamp. And this time I actually would like the timestamp. So I need to add, do the same thing with this one. If we save this one, let's look. I'm going to change it to a dimension. And this is my refresh. And notice how the last refresh date, this one does return it as a date time dimension. So I can go right to the format date function without having to turn it into a date. It's already a date. So I can say format date and then add my formatting here. So the trick that I want to mention here, if I do my day / MMs, Y, and then I want the time, hours, minutes, and seconds, we can add it on there. So this is showing May 13th at 8:38 p.m., which is the server time on this virtual machine that I'm on. Okay, so the thing I want you to remember about this formatting is notice how most things are lowercase here, except the M here. So the M, capital M's stand for months and lowercase m stands for minutes. If I were to put lowercase m's there, notice how now the date says 13:38, which is the minutes there. So we wouldn't want that. And then notice also, occasionally I've typed real fast and done my capital Y's, and it doesn't like that either. So lowercase for most things, except the months. And then the other one is the hours. Notice this, that if I change these H's to capital H's and remove the A on the end, that gives us military time. And if I hit enter now it's showing at 20:38:15. Okay, so that's something to remember for that. So the capital M's stand for months, capital H's for military or 24-hour clocks. Okay, so those are the quick things that I wanted to show there. I'm going to jump right to time dimensions because of time. Time dimensions are hierarchies, time hierarchies that we can add to our report. So perhaps your universe doesn't have, it has a date, but it doesn't have months, quarters, years. So this is a quick way where you can get that information. I'm going to create this time dimension and I'll say year, quarter, month. Notice I can change the names here, and I can also change it to a fiscal, say it starts in June or July or whatever your fiscal year starts, and say okay. And that gives us this time dimension, which is a cool thing. Now, if I switch this order date to the month, notice how I have my months now, and my measures are aggregating accordingly. And if I right click on this cell, we have this option for change level to quarter, or in this case, I also select a year. It works even nicer in reading mode because you don't have those other right click options. If I right click, I can jump right to month, or right click and jump to quarter. Okay, so a few things to be aware of with these time dimensions. It's not supported in SAP HANA Online mode. You can't do custom sorts with, however, notice that it automatically sorted the data it automatically sorted the months correctly. If we change this level back to the month, it put January 1st. It didn't start with April like it would. So that is nice that we don't have to apply a custom sort. It does not support delegated measures, and it does not support data tracking. And then also you cannot save a report element with a time dimension as a shared element. So for example, this table here with the time dimension, I couldn't save this as a shared element to use in another report, okay? However, we've got lots of advantages with it. One of the things that I want to show you real quick is one of the things that initially bothered me about the time dimensions was, what if I want to shorten this name? Instead of having that long month name, I just wanted to say Jan 2018, or even just Jan. So if I add a left formula on here and say, give me the left 3 on that, it does do that. But notice now, right away, you see that I lost my sort, and I also lost the ability to change levels. So in essence, it kind of, you lose that functionality. However, I'm going to show you how you can still accomplish that here. This one is formatted for that. And if I right click up here, I can change the level to the quarter. And I don't have the years showing on there, just the months. And I'll show you how I do that using alerts. Okay, so we're going to turn this real quick into our time dimension. And just for time's sake, I'll do quarter and month and drag month into here and turn this into a cross table. All right, so what I'm going to do is create an alert on here that tells it how to format. So in this case, I want the first option to say cell contents. When the cell contents is equal to, and I'll select the object of our time dimension, and I'll first do the month one. And I want to format that, and notice how we have this formula area here. So this is where I'm going to set up my left formula. And I'm going to use a formula editor here to select my month object here. And semicolon 3. And then I don't want it to be red. I want it to be black, and maybe we'll make it bold. Okay, and then I'm going to add one more for the month when the cell content equals. And I'll select our quarter object and format that. This time, instead of 3, I only want the first 2 characters. I'll select my quarter, semicolon 2. And that will give me my Q1, Q2. And I'll change the text to black and bold. Okay, and press OK. And there we go. Now we have our sort order, and we still can change the level and move up to quarter and show just the Q1. So that's a quick hack for being able to get the months to display a shorter name that doesn't take up as much room in your report using alerts. Okay, that was the quick things that I wanted to make sure I covered. Let me go back to this first report. Oh, one other thing on the time dimensions. A cool that it has is that occasionally we get data that only less than a year's worth of data. And this data set, you see, I only have January through May. But I want to turn it into a cross table. And I don't want it to stop at May. I want it to display all the way through December, and the values will fill in as the months progress. Okay. And now we have an easy way to do that. I can edit this time dimension. And down here at the bottom, I can say set ranges. And I can type in 1/1/2019 and 12/31. 2019. And there we go. So now I can display my table with all the months in there, and it will fill in those months as the time goes on. Okay, so that's a cool feature of the time dimensions, to be able to expand that out and display the months, even though you don't have all the data yet to fill in for that. Okay, cool feature about that. All right, I'm going to go back to my first report here and talk about adding and subtracting dates and using relative date. In this scenario here, we want to create a due date. So let's say that they want to get all their orders out within 5 days. So I want to know what that due date is. Okay, so it's going to be my order date, and I want to add 2 or 5 days to whatever the order date was. And we can't just say +5. It will object to that. However, using the relative date function, I can add 5 days +5. And that shows me the due date that I want. And then I could use a days between function. Let me insert another column. And if I save this as due date, I'll use a days between function and figure out the days between my due date and my ship date to see if it went out on time. So we've got due date there. I'll say days between due date and then semicolon, and I'll paste my ship date in. I forgot that we had such old data here. So days between my due date and my ship date. Oh, no, that should be the same thing. Oh, I know, I used the wrong ship date. Now, the ship date is, I added 2 years to that. There we go, that looks better. Sorry, I'm messing around with dates there, which I'm going to show you next. So any days, this one is 3 days past the due date, and you could add text in there as well if you wanted. Let me show you some other things that we could do with a relative date function. They also added, so we can not only add or subtract dates, but we can subtract time periods as well. So if I say relative date, and then I want to say add 2 years, and then year period. And you see how that added 2 years to my order date. I could also add 2 months to that. Notice how it's all one word there. and now I added 2 months to my order date. Okay. So there's month period, quarter period, year period. Notice also there is the time between we can do as well. Let me show you this formula. We could do that with timestamps as well. Oh, this one timed out. Let's see if I can refresh this report real quick. Okay. All right. So here's time between. We have our first date, our last date, and then I'm showing minutes here. These are all the time periods: a millisecond period, second period, minute period, hour, day, week, month, quarter, semester, and year. So you see, those are lots of options. And then I also added another one here just to show you how, okay, so these are the number of minutes between, but if I wanted to know fraction of an hour, if I change this to hour period, it actually rounds that, you see, up to the closest hour. So if that's not what I want, if I want to know it was a third of an hour, I could just say divide by 60. So take my minute period and then divide by 60. And now I know what fraction of an hour. This one actually took an hour and a half almost. This one's a little over a third of an hour. So lots of options in there. I hope you'll take advantage of these. It makes life so much easier having these periods available to us in our dates between. All right, any questions?
Hey, Roxanne. No open questions at this time from the attendees, but I actually have one of my own. So you had shown a little while ago how it automatically sorted the months, not alphabetically, but in the correct order. Do you know if that is just inherent in Webi, or is that a function of the universe? I've never seen it before, so.
Sure, that's a good question. No, it is a function of the time dimensions. So it's Webi universe.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you.